What if a $700 drone could erase a military helicopter in seconds? At 6:25 a.m., from just 4.8 meters above the frozen roadside, a Ukrainian FPV drone detonated into motion. 4 motors spiked past 92% throttle, drawing nearly 68 amps in a burst that should have cooked the battery in seconds. The video feed convulsed, static tearing through the image as the drone punched straight up into a storm of invisible force. Above it, a Russian Mi-8 cut through the mist at 43 meters altitude, steady at 147 kilometers per hour, rotors beating at 191 RPM. No lights, no radio, no warning. The crew believed the fog was armor. They believed wrong. The drone battery screamed 41%, each percent now equal to 5 seconds of life in air that measured just 6 degrees Celsius, cold enough to spike internal resistance and bleed power faster than any simulation predicted. Chasing the helicopter was impossible. The Mi-8 was faster by nearly 50 kilometers per hour. This was not pursuit. This was interception. The operator committed full throttle vertical climb. The drone slammed into the Mi-8 rotor wash, a violent column of collapsing air that spun the frame across all 3 axes. Orientation vanished. The image became noise, but the math held. The warhead detonated on contact. A shaped charge collapsed inward, forming a copper jet traveling at over 7,800 meters per second. A focused spear of molten metal capable of piercing 300 millimeters of steel. The Mi-8 aluminum skin measured barely 2 millimeters. The physics were not negotiable. Fire erupted instantly. Lift vanished. The helicopter rolled, clipped the air once more, then fell into the field below, swallowed by smoke and fog. A spotter drone confirmed the hit from 120 meters out. On the ground, the operators were already dismantling antennas, moving within 90 seconds, knowing counterfire would follow. If you were the one watching that battery tick down, would you have trusted the math or hesitated? 23 minutes earlier at 6:02 a.m., the same Mi-8 lifted off smoothly from a forward base, rotors settling into a calm, confident rhythm, altitude stabilized at around 40 meters. Speed locked in near 145 kilometers per hour. The flight profile was textbook, low, quiet, disciplined, exactly how Russian crews had learned to survive in contested airspace. From inside the cockpit, nothing felt urgent. No missile warnings, no radar pings, no radio chatter. GPS was useless, jammed into static. But that was normal now. Instead, the pilots followed the road below, a dark ribbon cutting through fields and tree lines, barely visible through the growing fog. To them, the fog was protection. By 6:04, visibility had dropped below 70 meters. By 6:06, it was closer to 50. The helicopter flew blind by design, trusting that anything dangerous would need sight, signal, or radar to find them. Soviet doctrine had taught this for decades. Stay low, stay steady, and the sky will ignore you. But the sky was not empty. What the crew could not know was that while radar was blind and cameras were useless, sound was traveling farther than physics usually allows. Overnight, a temperature inversion had formed. Cold air, trapped beneath warmer layers, bent acoustic waves back toward the ground, turning the fog into an amplifier. Every rotation of the Mi-8 5-blade rotor, beating at roughly 188 RPM, was echoing outward for kilometers. By the time the helicopter crossed its first bend in the road, those sounds were already being logged, time-stamped, and compared. Not by radars, not by satellites. Across a stretch of farmland nearly 18 kilometers wide, a hidden acoustic web came alive. Not radars, not cameras, just sound, raw, unavoidable, and impossible to fake. 32 improvised sensors lay scattered along roads, riverbanks, and tree lines, each no larger than a power bank, each drawing less than 0.3 watts, enough to survive 3 full weeks on a single solar charge. They were tuned to one thing: the Mi-8 5-blade rotor chopping the air at 188 to 192 RPM generated a low-frequency pulse between 21 and 39 Hz. A signature that penetrated fog, foliage, and terrain that swallowed radar whole. When the first sensor detected it, the signal was weak but distinct. 2.4 seconds later, a second sensor confirmed it. By the time the third sensor chimed in, the helicopter was already trapped by physics. Sound moves at 343 meters per second. Milliseconds mattered. Each delay became distance. Each distance collapsed into geometry. In under 7 seconds, the network resolved a moving target at 5.8 kilometers range, narrowing its location to less than 55 meters. Speed stabilized at 147 kilometers per hour. Altitude locked below 44 meters. The update rate climbed to 4 calculations per second, refining the track with every rotor beat pounding the cold air. A temperature inversion amplified everything. Cold air trapped beneath warmer layers bent sound waves downward, extending detection range by nearly 70%. What should have been a 2-kilometer acoustic shadow stretched past 5. The helicopter never knew. By 6:07, the system was not tracking where the Mi-8 was anymore. It was projecting where it would be in 30 seconds. At that point, the aircraft stopped being a moving object. It became a predictable equation already solved. At 6:07, the equation shifted. The Mi-8 did something it was not supposed to do. Instead of staying on the main road, it veered off onto a narrow dirt track barely 6 meters wide, unmarked, winding between frozen fields. From the cockpit, it looked like caution. From the ground, it was chaos. The acoustic track wavered, bearings adjusted by 12 degrees, then another 9. The helicopter speed stayed steady at 145 kilometers per hour. Altitude locked below 45 meters, but its lateral movement introduced uncertainty. Seconds of it, and seconds were everything. At the same moment, the fog thickened. Rolling in from the river valley, visibility collapsed to under 50 meters, then 40. Moisture filled the air, scattering infrared light, smearing contrast, turning camera feeds into gray noise. One drone operator watched his screen dissolve into static as his aircraft vanished into white. Another felt his controller vibrate once, then go dead. The cold had drained the battery in under 9 minutes, faster than any bench test predicted. There was no pause, no reset. A backup battery came out, wrapped in hand warmers, pushing barely 7.4 volts into a system designed for more. Flight time dropped to under 8 minutes. Range fell below 5 kilometers. The margin was now razor thin. Meanwhile, the acoustic network kept talking. Updates streamed in at 4% bearing shifts, Doppler changes, micro adjustments, and speed. The helicopter could not climb above 60 meters without entering radar coverage. It could not stray far from the road. Power lines and uncharted obstacles boxed it in. Every evasive move only narrowed the corridor it could safely fly through. By 6:12, the operators understood something brutal. The plan was no longer clean. The timing was no longer generous. And failure was now a single bad calculation away. But the math still worked, barely. As the fog swallowed everything except sound, the intercept window shrank to less than 90 seconds, and that was when the drones were launched. At 6:18, the fight shifted into a spectrum no one could see. Somewhere behind the front line, a Russian electronic warfare unit powered up. Antennas rotated, spectrum analyzers lit with noise. The system designed to hunt drone control links began sweeping wide bands, looking for anything that should not be there. To them, the sky suddenly felt wrong. They were right. The Ukrainian drones were already airborne, pushing forward in silence. Their control links did not sit still. Instead of transmitting on a single frequency, the system jumped 40, then 60, then nearly 80 hops per second, skipping across the spectrum faster than human operators could react. Each hop lasted milliseconds. By the time a signal was detected, it was already gone. On the Russian screens, it looked like ghosts. Power surged as the jammers increased output, flooding entire bands with noise. But flooding did not matter when there was no fixed target. The Ukrainian link was not shouting, it was whispering. Low power, constantly moving, buried inside static. What should have been a clean lock dissolved into chaos. At 6:20, one drone began to loiter near the predicted intercept zone. Altitude held at just under 6 meters. Speed dropped to almost zero. Battery showed 46%, falling faster than expected in 6 degrees Celsius air. Each percent now meant 6 to 7 seconds of usable flight. Another drone hovered farther back as insurance. A third stayed high, ready to record or replace whoever failed first. No radio chatter passed between them. Everything was pre-planned. Everything was timing. The Mi-8 pressed on, still dark, still steady, unknowingly flying into a corridor that had been narrowed by math, weather, and terrain. Its rotor beats grew louder in the acoustic feed, synchronous, unmistakable. By 6:22, the network refined the solution again. Speed unchanged, altitude unchanged, course locked. The jammers kept screaming into the air, burning power, achieving nothing. At 6:24, the lead drone settled into position beside the road, motors barely turning, waiting. The duel was over. Only the collision remained. At 6:24, everything went quiet. The lead FPV drone hovered beside the dirt road, altitude locked at 5.2 meters, motors barely ticking over at 18% throttle to conserve what remained. The battery read 43%, but in 6 degrees Celsius air that number lied. Internal resistance had climbed nearly 30%, bleeding power faster with every second of hover. Real flight time left under 2 minutes. Above the fog, the Mi-8 was closing, the acoustic feed sharpened. Rotor beats arrived in perfect synchronization. The 5-blade signature now impossible to confuse. Speed held steady at 146 kilometers per hour. Altitude unchanged at around 41 meters. Course unwavering. The helicopter had unknowingly committed to the most dangerous thing an aircraft can do in hostile airspace: predictability. At 6:24:32, sunlight broke through the fog for less than a second. It was enough. The helicopter canopy flashed, reflecting just long enough to confirm what the math already knew. Distance 310 meters. Time to crossing 9 seconds. The operator did not hesitate. Throttle forward. Current spiked past 70 amps. The drone leapt vertically, slamming into the Mi-8 rotor wash. The air turned violent, pressure collapsing and reforming faster than the flight controller could compensate. The video feed degraded into tearing static. Orientation vanished, but the trajectory held. At 6:25, impact. The warhead detonated on contact. A shaped charge collapsed inward, forming a copper jet traveling over 7,700 meters per second, a focused lance of molten metal that physics had perfected decades earlier. Against it, the helicopter aluminum skin, barely 2 millimeters thick, offered no resistance. Systems failed instantly. Lift was gone before the sound reached the ground. Fire erupted. The Mi-8 rolled once, then dropped into the field below, disappearing into smoke and fog. A spotter drone confirmed the crash from over 100 meters out. On the ground, the operators were already dismantling equipment, gone within 90 seconds. Artillery would come. It always did. A $700 drone assembled by hand had erased a multi-million-dollar aircraft. Not through luck, not through firepower, but through timing, physics, and a calculation that allowed no mistakes. The sky did not miss. It obeyed the math. What happened at 6:25 was not just the loss of a helicopter, it was the collapse of an assumption. For decades, air power relied on a familiar hierarchy: radar over vision, missiles over improvisation, industry over ingenuity. That morning, every layer failed at once. Radar saw nothing. Electronic warfare found only ghosts. Missiles were never launched. And yet the aircraft was still destroyed by sound, by math, and by a drone assembled on a workbench. The Mi-8 did everything doctrine demanded. It flew low, it stayed quiet, it avoided emissions, it trusted terrain and fog to hide it, but the battlefield had changed. The sky was no longer ruled by what could be seen or jammed, but by what could be predicted. A network that never spoke out loud listened patiently. Numbers replaced intuition, seconds replaced firepower. When the helicopter committed to a steady speed and a safe altitude, it unknowingly surrendered the one thing modern warfare cannot forgive: unpredictability. This was not a lucky hit. This was not desperation. It was a demonstration that cheap systems, when connected intelligently, can dismantle expensive ones. A reminder that in modern conflict, the most dangerous weapon may not explode loudly. It may simply arrive on time. And this raises a question that goes far beyond this single strike. If a $700 drone guided by sound and calculation can erase a military aircraft today, what happens tomorrow when thousands of them listen at once? So now I want to hear from you. If you were designing the next battlefield, would you invest in bigger machines or smarter networks? Would you trust armor and speed or invisibility and math? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more deep breakdowns like this, where technology, physics, and strategy collide, make sure